Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's lecture with Batia. And Batia and I were talking and thinking between the fact that it is the anniversary of October 7th and Sukkot, we were thinking, well, maybe not so many people are coming, but we are both very happy to see this. And because it is the anniversary and it is Sukkot, Batia has agreed to record. So if you have friends who weren't able to make it tonight and think that they were just out of luck, please share with them that this is being recorded. Thank you all for coming. For those of you who are friends of the Stirling Road Library, a special thank you to you for making it possible for us to have Batia as well as our other wonderful facilitators. And your generosity and your support of us makes this happen. If you are a guest or coming for the first time and would like to know more about us, please check out www.stirlingfriends.org. Find out all of the wonderful programs we have both online and in the library, and join us and become a friend as well. Those of you who are getting your newsletters, I hope that you are reading them and marking all of the amazing programs both in the library and on Zoom. And obviously you're registering because you're here tonight, and the participation has been quite remarkable, and we're very happy that we're servicing so many people. Look at your calendar. If you're not getting them, please let us know so that we could make sure that this is corrected. And if you are, just a couple of highlights. On the 19th, which is Sunday, we will be having a book fair, and the book fair will be dedicated to Cynthia Cohen, who just recently passed away. She left hundreds and hundreds of books, and her books will be part of our book fair on the 19th. So we always have a great time at the book fair. It's a great community event. We have fabulous volunteers who help us out, and join us if you're in the vicinity. If you're out of the vicinity, obviously you can't, but we really love having as many of you come as possible. Programs are varied. October is a busy month. I'm not going to go over it with you because you can read it on your own. So tonight, we haven't seen Batia in a while. She had an amazing summer. We're happy to have her back, and she's taking us back to Europe where she was. And we're going to Giverny, actually back to France where you were.
Yes.
A little bit north of France, but
yeah, different area, but yeah, that's nice.
And visiting with Monet. So take us along and show us all of the things. We're very excited to hear about it. So welcome back, Batia.
Thank you. Yeah, I missed you guys. Of course, I'm glad to be here. And thank you to the Friends of the Stirling Road Library. As you know, they survive donations, and your participation is very important. We're going to record this this lecture today. We have another class coming up with another subject next week. So hopefully you can join us as well. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to mute all of you for now. If you have any questions or anything that you want to say, you can just raise, the hand or unmute yourselves. So we're talking about Claude Monet's water lilies. Everybody knows they have an image of the water lilies for sure. And this is probably the most known area in l'Orangerie in Paris, where you can see the water lilies at its best. But he made around 250 oil paintings, and we're not counting the sketches and the drawings dedicated to water lilies. He really was obsessed at the end of his life doing this kind of art, but we're going to have to go back to understand why. And some of those paintings are really beautiful. So he made sketches, small canvases, and of course the L'Orangerie specific style installation. You can see the brushstroke, you can see his style, you can see that it is a reflection on the water, the most amazing representation of water lilies just floating, those clusters of leaves and flowers. And at the time where he was still alive, in 1913, when Marcel Proust published his book, actually 7 volumes of The Search of the Lost Time, he describes the water lilies, not only the garden of Giverny, but also the water lilies made by Monet. And you can see some of the details in this one. We're going to go back, of course, in time, but let me show you the brushstroke, because it is really important to understand how many layers Monet would do. And he would go back to those paintings very often, so he would never finish. When we see the flower, which we see in close-up on the right-hand side, we see that there is just color, and there's not a very defined shape. There's only an impression. Of course, the name impressionist comes from that. Or this area right here, which is actually the reflection on the water of some plants. So it is an effect, an atmosphere, some kind of a feeling when we are in front of this kind of paintings. And it is so famous that even there is a cake dedicated to Monet. Prulit, I don't know if you follow the British baking show, which I love, but she made this cake in an inspiration of some of the paintings made by Monet's water lilies, which is really, really interesting. But in today's world, and this is a work by Ai Weiwei, and he made this huge artwork, all with Lego tiles, or Lego bricks, actually. They say that it has 650,000 Lego bricks just to make this mural. And he was inspired by this other one made by Monet that it is today at the moment. And as you can see, this one is a triptych. So there's 3 different panels, because the idea of Monet is to feel kind of in the center of water, being there and feeling the painting, sorry. So if we go back, where did he have this idea? First of all, he started painting what we called en plein air. And this is one of the paintings that we have at the beginning of his career. Le Déjeuner sur Herbe, actually, he was inspired by the painting of Manet. And here we have the famous one, of course, that was a scandal in 1863. And Monet makes this painting. And he, of course, goes to those kind of picnics, and he made sketches while he was there. And still, at this moment, he will go back and he would compose the painting with different sketches that he made before. Later on, he's going to just paint what he sees at the time when he sees it. And he brings his canvas and he brings his colors and he paints. So here we have this painting. And why do I bring this up? Because it was very big, very large, and he never sold this painting at that time. So at some point he caught it and he sold the pieces of it. What we have today is only this part of the painting, and the rest has been lost. If you see it today at the Musée d'Orsay, you only see this part. So you lose the idea of a big artwork that will envelop you. So if you can see, we're losing the part on the right, a huge trunk that we have there. Some of the characters also in this painting were lost, and probably it probably was destroyed. We don't know if somebody has it somewhere else, but this is the only 2 parts that we have here. And so he kept on painting gardens. He is painting also fashion, and he met the model Camille Doncieux. He's going to paint her right here. She's sitting down. So his focus is the plants, the flowers, but also the shadows and that effect of the outside. This is a painting of her before that he did also. And here we have the perfect example of his work at the beginning. And he starts using large formats. This is very strange also, because until that moment, they were only used for historical paintings or religious paintings, not for something so mundane or so everyday life representation like this one. We have many of those examples of painting outside. He would paint Camille, which he's going to marry, as we can see her here sitting down. So it's not important to capture the detail of it, only the essence. What we see here is this vaporous kind of representation, the flowers, the shadows, or the brightness of the actually the sun coming through the leaves of the tree. And it's really this painting that becomes very ethereal. It's also a painting of the moment, very spontaneous. But in the 19th century, the middle class starts to have this idea of pleasure in gardening. This was not a thing before. Remember, you also have to think that people think about gardening, kind of a farmer that is working on the field. So in the 19th century, that changes. And until, of course, today, gardening is really a pleasurable activity. We have many examples, not only by impressionists like Gustave Caillebotte, of course, Monet, which we're going to talk more about him, but many other artists like Nolde on the right-hand side, Henri de Sidaner, and Max Lieberman later on, are going to be having very often their own gardens. Excuse me. So Monet starts working on plein air. And here we have a painting, The Artist's Garden in Argenteuil. And here we have those dahlias that he loved so much. He will love just taking care of flowers. But in this case, we see his friend, Renoir, painting Monet, painting the flowers, which is, it shows you how he painted. He would take his canvas, he would just take his paints, his palette, of course, and he would just stand there looking at nature, and he would just paint. So that is what we see that is coming in this new era of art. Caillebotte was a very good friend of Monet, so they would go to the parks. This is the Parc Monceau, painted also by Monet. So not only the flowers or the plants, but also people who were just leisurely walking or sitting down in the park. This is by Gustave Caillebotte, also the same Parc Monceau. It is rather interesting that they were painting side by side very often. We see them together, probably in different parts of the park or in the same part of the park, and then we see the different angles that they are depicting. The idea of perspective, space, and an open area of that path, or the focus on the right-hand side of Monet, of light, how it's really reflecting, and the people who are sitting or standing just there. If we think about still life painting, that was the traditional way of painting flowers, or a landscape, of course, that was not very common either. And this is a painting, an early painting by Auguste Renoir. So they leave behind still life painting, and what they do is to paint landscape. Now, to put this into historical perspective, 1874, we have the first Impressionist exhibition in the apartment of the photographer Nadar. And this is the view from that apartment, just so you understand what was happening. And this is the moment when we have the very famous painting, of course, that gave the name of the Impressionists. This is actually the painting. The other one is kind of different colors, but this is the color that we have. And the critic, Leroy, is the one who writes that this is just an impression, kind of this way of making a fool of those artists, because an impression is like a sketch, and he puts the name Impressionism. He's the one who coins the word Impressionism, making fun of them. But it's a very hazy landscape. The brushstroke is very fast, and you're showing the work. You're showing your brushstroke, very different from before. But this is the Porte of Le Havre, and he's not embellishing anything. He's putting the modernity of the Port of Le Havre, where they are doing, there's a shipyard over there. Of course, the sun is right almost in the center, and this is what it gives the name. In the year 2014, there was an exhibition in the Musée Marmottan, and they had made the math calculations from which window of this buildings was Monet painting from to make this painting. But there is also other artists actually Jean Baudin, who was an older generation, and actually he's going to be the mentor of Claude Monet, who painted this idea as well in many occasions, sunset or sunrises, etc. And he's the one who shows Monet to paint en plein air. And you can see the difference or the similarities, because there's a lot of similarities in both of them. As you can see in this painting, which is a little bit different, this is another one by Monet of the same period. It's called Sunrise. And there's an argument if this is probably the picture that Leroy was referring to instead of the one that we know as Impression. They are very, very similar. One is a sunrise, the other one is a sunset, but both of them were displayed on that exhibition on the apartment of Nadar. So we really do not know, because the original name of these two paintings was Impression, nothing else. So what we see in Monet is that he's painting what he sees. The boats, the buildings, the sunset, the clouds, the reflection on the water. He's not embellishing anything. He's not inventing anything. He is painting and what he's looking at, as you can see in this one as well, the Port of Le Havre. And let's see, well, this is the photograph. As you can see, probably more or less what he was looking at when he painted. This is a very busy port, still today, of course. And we see him painting all the time outside, en plein air. And this is a painting by Monet, of Claude Monet, painting in this boat, because he had a boat that he used it as a study, and here we have him with his canvas in front of him. And here we have him again painting while he was experiencing reality. And he was really interested in representing the reflection on the water, a moment, something that goes away very fast, that just disappears. And as I mentioned, it's going to be ethereal. Like, for example, this sunset over the Seine at Lavacour is this winter effect. And we see the village in that area on the back, of course, the sun. You can see that it looks like a sketch. It looks like very fast work. And what we are looking at is how the flow of the river, as it progresses, because of course the sun begins to thaw the snow, and the colors taken from the water and the air makes this mist, this atmospheric effect that is really very interesting and very subtle. But if we are close enough, we see that there are only some strokes that are there. And with that, he achieves so much, which is really impressive. When we see his paintings of fog, of rain, it really gets to your soul. Like this one, which is this town of Venteuil in the fog. And we can see, of course, the church and the landscape, which is really hazy in the painting by Monet. And we can compare it with a painting by him from 1867, which is very crisp and very clear, with this one, which is more about the feeling of the atmosphere of the place, not about being very accurate with each one of the elements that we have here. So we have paintings of fields, of flowers, of beautiful landscapes, as this one, where there is an introduction or an inclusion actually of people, characters, like in this case that follows, in this case, this mother and child that are on the back of that hill, and then in another one in the lower part or in the foreground. But look at the flowers. We understand that they are flowers, but they are almost abstract, because look at the shape of them. They're just blotches of color. So they are disproportionate. They are working towards abstraction, even though he does not know it. But here we have him. And when we see the detail of his painting, or the technique that he uses, the color is unmixed. You mix it with your eyes, and this is an effect. He uses what we call impasto, which is a very thick layer of color without any solution to dilute it. And the mixture is optical, actually. He doesn't use any black. Black is a combination of all colors. And studies have shown that he used up to 15 layers of paint. They're really very, very heavy. There's this textural vibration, as I point out, and even looks almost three-dimensional, kind of this sculptural feeling. And he did not wait enough to paint on top of the other layer. So what is called, that technique is called wet on wet. What we do know is that he would go back to painting. So in his studio, he would have many paintings going on, and he would paint one, and then he would go to another one, and he would go back to the same one, etc., etc. So some of them would have more or less like 60 sessions. And we go to Giverny, of course, because this is the focus of our lecture today. But I wanted you to have an introduction, and we get to the place. In 1885, he rents the house at Giverny. What you see today is the adaptation that he made later to that house. And there's, of course, a lot of work in the ground, especially in the gardens. When he rented it out, he envisioned already that he was going to turn the small pond into an Asian-style garden. But at that time, of course, he did not own the land yet. When he decided to do that later on, there was, of course, local resistance. They did not want any foreign plants into the region. Nevertheless, he wins approval, and he expands the pond, and he diverts the water from up the river, and he filled it from water lilies, as we all know. This is the house, as you can see. This is an aerial view. This area right here, everything is very manicured, and crossing the street right here is the Asian garden with the pond. But all of it was part of, well, it still is part of the house of Monet at Giverny. His friend, Jean Singer Sargent, a very important painter, he visited him. And this is a painting of Singer Sargent of Monet painting by the edge of the wood. It's really interesting to see him in this idea of another painter painting him painting. It's kind of this interesting way of just painting or depicting a specific moment when he's concentrated just painting something that he's looking at. Singer Sargent was famous for his portraits of society, but he also made beautiful landscapes and other paintings as well. And here we have his friend being painted by him. This is interesting because until 1889, he starts painting the pond that he already was filling with those water lilies. But this is one of the beginnings of his obsession of that reflection. In the year 1889, we have the wall exhibition. The Eiffel Tower is when it is built, and this is the culmination of the Impressionists. By this time, remember, 1874, when they first started exhibiting, nobody liked their paintings. By this time, 1889, the Impressionists are well known. And in 1890, he's prosperous enough to buy the house that he was renting out before. So he is going to include, of course, all of the things that he wanted to do. And this is a photograph of Giverny. Probably some of you have been there. But if you haven't been, it's a place, of course, full of tourists today. But it is really very well kept. And it's been a lot of time and a lot of work to finally have this wonderful place refurbished and maintained, and is really, really beautiful. So in 1895, he's going to add this Japanese style wooden bridge. It's an addition to the pond. And as you know, he's going to paint also that bridge in many, many occasions with different hues, with different colors. And this one is an example that is not very, very well known because of the red and pinkish colors. But as you can see, the center representation is the bridge and the reflection of the water of that same bridge, of course. The bridge is really one of the iconic views of Giverny. But you have to understand that he was really a passionate horticulturist. He loved the garden. And he said at some point that he wanted the garden for the pleasure of the eye and also for motives to paint. He would tend to his garden very often. And in 1899, he makes a series of 18 views of the wooden footbridge. So this is just one example of those. And you can see that still the focal point is the bridge, not the water lilies, but of course they are represented in a wonderful way with the reflection, of course. The reflection of the water is as important as the background itself or the flowers. Everything is composed in a manner that is very harmonious, very, very poetic and very beautiful. Here we have a photograph of him in front of the Japanese bridge, of course, one of the few photographs that we have of him, another one right here, tending to his garden. The house is in the background, as you can see in this old photograph. And this is a photograph of today, how the garden looks like today. As I mentioned, it's still really very well maintained. He would paint with many colors, and he would not, by this time, he would not use black and no outline. He wanted to have just the atmosphere. Suzanne Ochede, who was his stepdaughter, was posing for him for this painting, and she recalls that she couldn't move for so many hours. It was very hot, and she was just standing there, and at some point she fainted because he was just in a frenzy painting that moment with the wind blowing and the sun and the clouds, etc. Here we have Suzanne Ochede in a photograph, and here we have his first wife, Camille, also in a painting with one of their son, Jean, that is very similar, but it has a different way of representing. Camille on the left, she has this veil on her face, but we can still see her gaze, also their son. And on the right, we see Suzanne Ochede, but looking to the other side, and the effect is different because we don't see her face, we don't see her features. He made a series of many things, like the haystacks, and I'm going to go fast with the haystacks because we're just talking about the Giverny, but I want you to see that it is not the only obsession that he had. He wanted to capture moments. He wanted to capture different moments in time, late afternoon, how the sun reflects, how the winter, for example, the sun, the snow is different, and it has different colors, different hues, different shadows, of course. So he wanted to represent each one of the moments in the year, or maybe in a day, the different effects, as you can see this one as well, with the sun coming to on one side, the shadows on the other one. Sometimes they are purple or green or different colors. This one in particular was discovered a few years ago, and they thought it was like a copy or something at the university in Finland, and they saw that there was the signature beneath the paint and the varnish, and they saw it with a special camera, and they discovered it was an original Claude Monet. So sometimes it happened, and we're very happy to see another one. When he starts painting water lilies is in 1897, and it becomes an obsession. It becomes the focal point of all of his work. He is getting older. The water lilies are really very close to him because he lives in Giverny, and he is painting without any horizon, without any sky, and so he would paint from one to the other. As I mentioned before, he would not stand just in front of one painting and finish it. He would just have a lot of paintings at the same time, a lot of artwork, and he would just go from one to the other, from one canvas to the other, until he was satisfied. And here we have an example of how important the reflection is in a painting. So we see the clusters of the water lilies here floating, and then at the same time we see the reflection of the trees that are somewhere behind. The space is really almost abstract. If I wouldn't tell you this is water lilies, or these are our water lilies, probably if you just see the color, you wouldn't think it's something in particular, just a painting of colors. But sometimes they're more defined, like this one right here, and you really see that none of them have any horizon. So in 1909, he made 48 of this series that was exhibited. This is one of the examples that we have, but we have so many, as I mentioned at the beginning, 250 or more dedicated. But just in 1907, I can show you just this representation of the same area, probably the same moment, but with different colors. They are the same because we see that the water lilies move very little, but the colors are completely different. And some of them are private, some of them are in other museums around the world. He made also a series of the Cathedral of Rouen. For 2 years, he dedicated himself just representing the different moments in the year, the different seasons, in the morning, in the afternoon, almost at night, etc., with the different colors. When his second wife died in 1911, he was 71 years old, and he is going to be really suffering later on from cataracts. He was losing his sight, and some of his paintings are really very different. The colors become, some of them, brighter, probably because he didn't see very well, and some of them have much more contrast. And this is one example of his paintings. There is a study that they did, and they say that probably because of the cataracts, he had kind of this yellow filter. So he was compensating using more blue or more violet. And we see paintings like this one from that year. Also in 1914, his oldest son, Jean, married Alice Hochet's daughter, Blanche, and he died from syphilis. This is an older painting of Jean. Of course, we have seen him already, but it's a very sad moment for him. On the other hand, 1914, his other son, Michel, was sent to war, to the front. And as you know, World War I started in 1914. The only painting that we see that has a historic theme is this one. It's called Weeping Willows, and he explained that it was dedicated to the fallen soldiers during the war. He started in 1917 and he finished it in 1918. He also said that while the war was going on, the war was very close to his house, to Giverny, so he could hear the bullets near his house, and he wanted at this point to retire. He was really a sad old man, and he didn't want to do anything anymore. But his friend, Georges Clemenceau, visits him, and here we have him together. By the way, this is a painting of Georges Clemenceau by Edouard Manet, of course, early on in his life. And Georges Clemenceau is going to convince him to do a commission. So let me show you one of these triptychs that he did. And very often we see paintings like this one, that it has a very long chronology. We see 1915 to 1926. And this is because he would come back and keep on painting on them. This is part of a triptych, by the way. And look at the detail. Sometimes we miss this amazing array of colors and the combination that he uses that we don't see in nature, but he captured it somehow with those clusters that we see them close, and we don't realize that they are just floating on the water. So this triptych, let me show you, it has, of course, this is the centerpiece in St. Louis, Missouri. This one is in the Cleveland Museum, and this one is in the Nelson Atkins Museum. If you see the three of them together, it's very interesting to see, because when you have a painting that it was meant to be this way, you have a different experience. Today, we don't see them together. There are very few that are like that, but sometimes when there's an exhibition, we can see them this way, but it is a triptych. By 1917, we have new artists. he was really appalled by what was happening. And those new artists, they are disgusted with for Impressionism. They don't like Impressionism at all. We have Duchamp, for example, Picasso, Matisse, and other artists that are coming up with new ideas, with new ways of painting. Of course, he keeps on painting those splashes, those spots of color with no horizon and no sense of space. But he's going to be the inspiration for many artists to come. During the war, he has a sense of loss. He has a sense of getting back into nature, to immerse himself in poetry, in his own garden, of course, as you can see in this photograph. In 1917, still the war was on, and there was a huge storm and destroyed most of his garden. It was a terrible loss because he also lost part of his studio. And so he was really sad, of course, at that moment. And here we have a photograph with some guests. And also we see Blanche, the woman who had married his son, and Georges Clemenceau, who is right here on that side, who was by this time the Minister of France. And he's the one who's going to convince him. Now, what's happening also in 1917? Auguste Rodin died. And Auguste Rodin is going to donate, before he died, his work to the nation. And this is the beginning of the Musée Rodin, where he was also living, and it was his studio at the same time. So it is a big change, of course, in art. And this is the moment when he offered 2 panels, and Clemenceau finally convinced him to make 8 panels for a specific site that is going to be curved, with the ceiling that it has to be that's filtering the light, and it's going to affect the effect of the panels depending on the weather. If it's darker or if it's raining, it will look different inside. So he's going to, after the storm, the studio has destroyed the roof, and he built a larger studio, the one that you can see today. And in that larger studio, he can work on larger works, as you can see in this photograph. And you find here some of the panels that he was working on, every time larger and larger. And of course, some of them are not water lilies, like this wisteria that was restored. And they found that the broken glass from the ceiling had damaged part of the painting. So when there was a restoration of this painting, which you see right here, very careful restoration of this wisteria, they also made some studies with X-rays to fix it, and they found that there was another version of the water lilies just hiding beneath the painting of the wisteria flowers. So not every time we see a painting, it's just that painting. Sometimes there's something beneath that painting that allows us to see some part of the process. So there are other wisterias that sometimes they are looked into as, again, another water lily, but because they are very abstract. But this is not the reflection of the water. This is part of those wonderful representations that come larger and larger, and usually he does this horizontal or very large rectangle kind of format. We have that his paintings are really a place for meditation. So when the war ended in 1918, after the armistice, he wrote finally to Georges Clemenceau, and he said, "I'm about to finish 2 decorative panels that I wish to sign on the day of victory, and I approached you with a request to offer them to the state through your mediation." And he is going to say, "I have painted these canvases as monks of former times illuminated their missals. They don't owe anything to anything else than the collaboration of loneliness and silence to a fervent, exclusive attention that borders on hypnosis." He really is very focused on this kind of representation. Only reflection only the water, the floating water lilies, the idea of nature being, you being as an observer of nature and being immersed in nature and in water. So it is called at the beginning the Grand Decoration, or La Grande Decoration. And he says, I was once briefly tempted to use water lilies as a sole decorative theme in a room. Along the walls, enveloping them in the singleness of its motive, this was to have created the illusion of an endless hole of water without horizon or shore. Here, nerves thought from overwork could have relaxed, lulled by the restful sights of those still waters and those who ever lived there. The room would have offered a refuge for a peaceful meditation at the center of a flowing aquarium. And this is exactly what you feel when you are in the center of l'Orangerie room, where you are immersed. And probably this is the first art installation ever, because you are in the center of this water pond. You are probably just meditating or feeling this envelopment of this of the water lilies. And it is also the Grand Decoration. So he donated finally 12 panels for this place. He was really involved with the architect. There's an oval plan, as you can see here, with very diffuse light that also is going to be affected by the weather. And all of the panels are in this oval walls around it. So this representation, this really installation has this effect of real weather conditions. The water lilies are affected by the sun, by the wind, the way that he's capturing all of those effects of the atmosphere is really amazing and beautiful. He gets the natural light, and for him in his studio was very important to have that. So he had a lot of glass built on that ceiling to have that visual effect. So not only he's going to be inspired by the pond that he has in his house, but also by the light that comes into his studio. Because in this case, he's finishing the paintings inside the studio. He's not taking those huge canvases outside on plein air, but the inspiration comes from nature, comes from that pond. So it's probably the first art installation. It's kind of disorienting because of the curved wall that we have, but it's really immersive. You feel that you could swim in that water, or you could just float like one of those water lilies. The paintings that we see right here become so famous that they have reached, of course, amounts in auction of millions of dollars. And I'm just going to mention some of them because it's very rare that we see them being sold in the market. This one was sold for $72 million. It depends, of course, on the colors, on the format, on the dimensions of it, of the provenance as well, where it has been before, etc. Just a few examples of them. This is one that is not that large, and this one was sold for $80.4 million. Here we have another one, which probably is not as famous or as important. So it was sold just for $50 million, not as expensive as the others. But in this case, it's a different one because it's a vertical representation, and it's not exactly only the reflection, but it is the garden itself, which was really important and impressive. So he uses different techniques. Corrugation is the name that we give to the thick layers of color. And then he uses at the end thin diluted strokes of color on top. That gives us the effect of floating, which is really amazing. In my view, I find this technique really very impressive because you can see layers, and then you feel that the top layer, which is diluted color, is really floating on the other colors, which is the reflection. We can see some of the details of that technique. And then he uses other techniques like scraping. So what he does is he removes any unwanted or excess paint that he has. And another technique that he uses is called leaching, which he will squeeze the paint directly from the tube onto the paper to drain the oil. And he would have this softer appearance when he would use it on the painting. Look at this one, for example. So this subtle fusion of reality and reflection. What is floating? What is just a reflection? And very often we see that critics have compared them to poetry, to music, because of the harmony and the color composition that he uses. Some of them probably are not as well done. And after the cataract operation, he made some paintings, and this is 1924, very late painting. Again, we see the bridge, we understand, but it's not one of the best examples. Let me show you this movie of an interview of him, more or less in that time. There's only music, of course. We see that he is in his garden, and here is the pond, as it would look at that time. It's very similar as we see it today. He's painting in a smaller canvas, of course, not like the ones that we see at l'Orangerie. He would smoke like crazy, as you can have this image of him with a cigarette on his mouth. And we can see him at work during that time, just being inspired by his garden and nature, of course. And then you can see part of the garden as well. And there's a small dog around there. There it is, as you can see him. He died of lung cancer. Of course, he smoked a lot. He was 86 years old when he died in 1926. This is one of the probably last paintings that he did. It's part of the house right here, part of the garden. It's of course very, very hard to see, but it's not probably one of the best paintings that we have. L'Orangerie, of course, it is still a museum that is regarded as a beautiful place to immerse yourself in his paintings of water lilies. There was an exhibition in 2018 called Water Lilies, American Abstract Paintings at the last moment and the last Monet, how Impressionism became Expressionism. And there was a comparison of 10 works by Monet with 20 American Abstract Expressionists. And you can see some of them here. This is Claude Monet, of course, and this is Maurice Louis. I'm going to show you some others, like this one by Monet, which was compared to other ones. This is also one of the paintings by Monet. And after World War II, Giverny became the site of pilgrimage for young American artists. They were studying in France, art, usually in Paris, and they would just go to Giverny to see the house of Monet, the water lilies, of course, at l'Orangerie. Ellsworth Kelly was impressed by the paintings of the water lilies and the gestural brushstroke. And he would have a painting by Ellsworth Kelly, the tableau vert, that was also included in this exhibition. And he actually would say a lot about the influence of Claude Monet in his work, his abstract work. Also, abstract expressionism was coined by Clement Greenberg. He saw Monet's water lilies in Paris, and he said that some of the works by Newman, by Clifford, also were following the footsteps of the elder French artist Claude Monet. Here we have Barnett Newman, another of those painters that was compared to or inspired by the water lilies made by Monet. And we see John Mitchell as well, because she was also living between New York and France, and she actually lived and bought a house very close to Giverny. And here we have some of the paintings by Monet. besides the painting by John Mitchell. We see other paintings also by Monet. This is compared to a painting by Willem de Kooning. Those abstract expressionists that were really famous at the time. In 1955, Alfred Barr, who was the director of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, bought the first water lilies in the US. Other museums, of course, followed suit and started to buy water lilies. Another artist, Philip Guston, who was also inspired by the water lilies by Monet, he would say so as well. And this is Helen Frankenthaler, one of the other expressionist, abstract expressionist artists, also inspired by the colors and the water lilies by Monet and other, of course, paintings by him. The same as San Francis and other artists that were inspired by his works of flowers, of landscapes. There is a story that in the year 2015, just before Halloween, more or less like today, at the Cleveland Museum of Art, there was a sighting of a ghost of Claude Monet. Somebody captured this photograph. I don't know why or how they did it. Probably it's just, today we would say it's artificial intelligence, but at that time it was probably just inserted there, this photo montage. But they said they were installing the exhibition Monet to Matisse, and they reported this snapshot was taken by a staff member and is not retouched or photoshopped. And we have heard from others that they've seen the man, but there hasn't been a confirmation in his identification. As you can see, it looks like Monet, and of course, Monet is being is an artist that everybody knows about. The water lilies, in particular, are cherished by many artists. And I want to stop the share so we can have anybody who has some questions or comments. And I hope you have enjoyed today's class. Thank you very much, everyone. You have to unmute if you want to participate.
Thank you. Thank you, Batia. I feel like I've taken a trip to Giverny with your wonderful paintings. Thank you.
Thank you. I think if somebody wants to say
So
something.
I have a couple of questions. One, I was curious about the ceiling in the orangery, because it looks rather high tech today with some, contemporary materials. What was it like in his day, and have they changed it?
Well, what I know about is that it used to be a kind of a glass that was kind of frosted. I'm sure that there's something else covering it, because I don't think they have glass. Imagine with the weather, if it snows or I don't know what. But it used to be some kind of a translucent material that allowed the sun to come in. So, but I'm not so sure what they have today. I've been there. I know that they have artificial lighting. I like light, I'm sorry. But I don't know if they have changed it or there's a structure or something else. I have no clue. Sorry about
Okay. And then one other question, we know he was influenced by the Japanese, which we didn't talk about tonight,
No,
but you did mention the 18 views of, I forget what, but they do these things about views of Mount Fuji. And so I'm just wondering if that idea of,
definitely.
yes.
Well, yes, definitely. Okay. Hokusai, who is one of the artists, Japanese artists who made those series of what is called ukiyo-e, which are the woodcuts from Japan that came to Paris in particular in the mid-century, mid-19th century. And of course, there was a whole series of a traveling art series of Mount Fuji. And it was an influence on him, but the most probably the idea of a series comes from that he wanted to capture all of the different effects of light. But I have to tell you, Cézanne, who made around 60 paintings of Mount Victoire, he was really inspired by Mount Fuji's series of paintings.
Electric off. Turn it off.
Okay. So yeah, so of course it has some influence. He was, as many other artists would do at the time, he was collecting those woodcuts. And he has some paintings, I'm sure that you have seen it, of his wife, Camille, painted with a kimono, and all of the fans, the Japanese fans that he collected in his studio. So yes, definitely there was something there about the series. Thank you for your question. Any other questions, please? We have time for that. Or comments, of course. Okay. So I think we're done. And I hope you have enjoyed today's class. Next week, we're gonna have the very famous painting, the Garden of Earthly Delights. I think it's Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch. I hope you can join us. And you can also, of course, subscribe to the newsletter and have a donation to the Friends of Stirling Road Library. And as I always said, $10 would do so much for you. Thank you, everyone here. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank
And
you
for
very
those
much.
of
This
you,
was
we're
amazing.
gonna, thank you, Marilyn. We're gonna have the recording. And so
Yes.
in case somebody missed it and you know that they want to watch it, we're gonna send it. Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
I'm going to stop the recording.